there's a road to the left of the Malvern Yard, which takes you 3/4 of a mile out to the edge of Hackleton's Cliff. And Hackleton's Cliff provides one of the most spectacular views in the entire Caribbean. It is almost 1,000 feet above the sea, and you see the entire northeast coast from Ragged Point Lighthouse in the east all the way to Pico Tenerife and St. Lucy's Cliffs in the northwest.
Thank you very much, Sir Henry, for showing us the way here to Hackleton's Cliff. It is your weekly program that has always been concerned with the virtual gathering, that is, the gathering that occurs on air and online. I'm Sherwood McCaskey, as always, thanks for your time. It is as if you are suspended, looking down on the Atlantic Ocean as it caresses this side of the island. In this week's program, my colleague, historian Trevor Marshall, will speak to us not only about the beauty and the flora of this area, but he will speak about the economic and social history that can be derived from a view of the area. For obvious reasons, he is keen to be a part of this program. Take it over, Brother Marshall.
I'm greeting you today as a native of the most serene parish in Barbados, the parish of St. John. St. John, which is about 8,000 acres. It is the 8th largest of the parishes. And we start here at perhaps the most iconic spot in this parish. Some will say it is St. John's Church, but no. We are here at Hackleton's Cliff. Now, my friends from St. Joseph will contest my presence here and wonder, why is he talking about St. John from a place in St. Joseph? Because there's that continuing debate whether Hackleton's Cliff is in St. John or is it in St. Joseph. Now, the doyen of West Indian and Barbadian historians, Sir Woodville Marshall, in his book of Halls, Hills and Holes, Place Names in Barbados, says authoritatively, Hackleton's Cliff straddles the boundary between St. John and St. Joseph. So I have it on good authority that it is both in St. John and St. Joseph. Now, where we are standing is perhaps the exact boundary. And we're on this cliff, which is what? An escarpment. Most of St. John is a plateau. Plateau meaning a high land which flattens out at the top. And we're here at about 1,000 feet above sea level. Now, there are not many other parts of Barbados which are higher than this. There's Mount Hillaby, there is Castle Grant, Mount Misery, Chimborazo, those are in St. Andrew and St. Joseph. And then there's Hackleton's Cliff. 1,000 feet contour, and it gives you an excellent panorama. This is one of 4 magnificent scenic points for you people who love landscapes. To the right of your screen, there is Cherry Tree Hill, Morgan Lewis Windmill. We say hello to the farmer, Richard Hode, at Morgan Lewis. And then there is, about a mile from here, also on the left, Buckden. Buckden, which is also on the Hackleton's Cliff escarpment. It was a plantation, and it affords you a closer view of the East Coast and the Scotland district. And then there's Hackleton's Cliff, where we are. And finally, there's St. John's Parish Church, which descends to a point about 850 feet above sea level. Now, geologically, physiologically, Hackleton's Cliff is a part of what is Barbados, which came out of the ocean eons ago, Pleistocene era, millions of years ago. And rocks rolled down from here into the ocean, and consequently, when the Kalinago, who we call Caribs, came to Barbados from this coast, they were greeted by these coral rocks, which were menacing, and they called the island Ichi Ruganaim, Ichirouganaim, Ganaim. Big red island with sharp white teeth, the teeth being the coral rocks which you can see to your left from Zores and Martins Bay and Bathsheba, Tent Bay, going past the musical rocks at Bathsheba, and those gave the island part of its name. Now, Hackleton's Cliff, as we said, is of your hard coral foundation. Barbados, as you know, is 95% coral, and Hackleton's Cliff is an outstanding piece of your physical escarpment. It is sheer, it is dangerous, it is beautiful. Indeed, there's an area called Monkey Jump, which is only about 200 meters from here to your right. Along that area, which is heavily wooded, Monkey Jump is known not just because they had monkeys, but during the Second World War, Captain Morris Hutt, who was training the West India Regiment, took the intending soldiers, one of them being my father, in the 1940s, 1943-44, training them. And that was a dangerous piece of this escarpment called Hackleton's Cliff. There's an area which would challenge the skills of known mountaineers, people who have climbed up to the highest point in the Caribbean, in the Dominican Republic, or climbed Blue Mountain Peak, or El Cerro de la Ripo in Trinidad. We don't have those high points, but we have Hackleton's Cliff, which is as dangerous and as challenging as any. That's over to your right. Now, over to your left, we're looking down on St. Joseph, and we're looking down on Mount Dacres in the foreground, St. Elizabeth Village, and going down then to Bathsheba. You see Bathsheba going down the hillside, what was Beachmont, the Bathsheba Community Center, going down past Tent Bay and hitting the Atlantic Ocean. This is the view from here. And then there is Martins Bay. Martins Bay, which is directly center of the picture, right? Going around to Zores over to your right. And then we're coming around to Newcastle. Newcastle further to your right, all in St. John. And you move around, the camera takes us around to the areas of Pothouse, Welch Village, Sargent Street, Cotrington College, and Sealy Hall. And from here, extreme right, you can see College Savannah. And if you peep around the corner, we can't see it, but Ragged Point is just out of the range of you viewers. So you are seeing a vista of about 12 miles from North Point Surf Resort in St. Lucie, coming along Pico Tenerife. You can see Pico Tenerife jutting out there like a pyramid near the top of your picture, and with that whitish area on the side of it, that's Oceanic Series at the back of Pico Tenerife. And wherever you go on the East Coast, you can see Pico Tenerife. And then there is Foster's Funland. You come around Green Pond, Long Pond, Morgan Lewis itself. As we said, Cherry Tree Hill, Morgan Lewis Windmill. You can see it. You can see the lands, Walkers, Turner's Hall Wood, Rock Hall, and then that bulk, which prevents you from seeing Belle Plaine. That bulk is Chalky Monk, Bissix, and Cambridge. And then you're looking along the road to Bissix Plantation. There's Bissix there, extreme left with its tower. Its tower rising. And then Upper Parks and the Saddleback, St. Bernard's Village, and the Spa, and coming down through Mellows, and you're looking at the road or the area of Mellows, Melvin's Hill, and coming down Fraser's and down to Bathsheba. So that's the St. Joseph side of Hackerton's Cliff. Well, there is a defile we indicated which takes you down through to Mount Dacres.
This is the passageway or the footpath that leads from Hackleton's Cliff
right in front of me. In front of me, as a matter of fact, right here, I'm overlooking here a deliberate declivity. This is a tomb here, a tomb area, and there are 3 tombs here. And these were tombs containing the remains of members of 3 planter families: Harper, Mears, and Stewart. And of course, you can feast your eyes on this area, the coral limestone forming the boundaries of their resting place, and you notice that they are towards the edge of the cliff. Now, I spoke about the edge of the cliff. Hackerton's Cliff is known in St. John and St. Joseph for a particular legend. Now, Hackerton's Cliff, Hackerton, we know from Sir Woodville's book, is established as an area, a village in the 1600s as the northern end of Malvern Plantation. Malvern Plantation is half mile to the south, but there was a village here, and but this area was open land, and then the sharp drop of the cliff. Now the legend gives us the point that Thomas Hackerton, a young man like our photographer Carlos, and Thomas Hackerton, well, he loved the ladies, and the ladies loved him. But one particular lady was his intended bride. He proposed to her, and she gave him the 3 G's: goodness, God, go. And when he didn't go, she said she gave him 3 G's, an R, and an N. Goodness, God, go right now. So that was the end of their romance. And Thomas took it hard. He was at Malvern Plantation, and he was a good horseman, and she was at Easy Hall. So one morning, he got up and he went over to Easy Hall and asked the groom here for the mistress's favorite horse. And the groom obligingly gave him. The groom was a slave, and he couldn't contest what the master wanted. And Thomas Hackerton, Hackleton, Thomas Hackerton, or Hackleton, took the horse and rode it, and he rode it at full tilt past Malvern, coming along this road here between the canes. And the poor horse is wondering, what is this madman going to do? Perhaps he's going to say, "Gee, whoa," at which point the horse, will stop. But no, Thomas Hackerton, when he got near the edge of the cliff, said, "Giddy up," meaning go even faster, horse. And the horse took the plunge, and both the horse and Thomas Harrison went over the cliff, a sad waste of horse flesh. That is the legend we've had about Hackerton's Cliff, and it is embedded in the folklore of this area in the same way that Lancaster Gully is embedded in the folklore of people around Greenwich and Orange Hill in St. James as an area of disaster. Lancaster had 38 people dying. Hackerton's Cliff, according to legend, had a man and a horse. Now, let's get to what do you see at Hackerton's Cliff. You see all kind of foliage, and Andromeda Garden is about a mile from here to the north, and that contains one specimen of almost every plant growing in Barbados, created by Iris Branch, who became Iris Bailey and finally ended as Iris Banoki. right? Now from Hackerton's, you can see Whitewood. You can see in front of us is, yes, this is Whitewood. Here to your right, immediate right, you can see Poison Tree. You can see Bay Leaf. You can see Coconut. Of course, you can see Royal Palm. All kinds of, every kind of tree. You can see the Casuarina, the Almond. Every possible kind of tree that grows in Barbados grows in this area. And the only other place where you can find a greater concentration of the trees of Barbados than here is, of course, in Turner's Hall Woods. So Hackerton Cliff is an area for the person who wants a panoramic view, the person who's interested in the folklore and the legend of Thomas Hackerton. Is a place for looking at this area where the Harpers, the Mayors, and the Stuarts are buried. It is a place for looking at the villages of St. John and St. Joseph. And, of course, it is a restful place. Now, there's something else about this view from Hackerton's Cliff. You look down upon Tent Bay, near Powell Spring, Tent Bay, between not so much Powell Spring as Beachmont, which is a community center, is just under the community center in St. Joseph. And it is from Tent Bay that the fishermen, with their rowboats, which had small sails, that they set out to sea. And, of course, you know the tune Fisherman. Pull them oarsmen, 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 pull them. Out every morning for the break of day. Pack me bundle and I'm on me way. Out where the fishes do live and grow. I get me boat ready and I make to go. You gotta pull them oarsmen, 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 pull them. Now that song was created by Vernon Cadogan from Bush Hall, St. Michael. And Vernon Cadogan also wrote Sugarcane Growing on Me Native Land. And Vernon Cadogan told me, when we were doing the book Folk Songs of Barbados, that he came to St. Joseph. He looked down on St. Joseph and on Tent Bay from up here, Hackerton's Cliff. And he saw in the 1950s up to 30 sailboats going out from Tent Bay. And he created that song, the Fisherman Song, which our school children now know as Pull Them Oars. So this is a site which has given birth to an iconic song, the Fisherman Song. It is a site also from which our celebrated poet historian, Edward Kamau Brathwaite, he looked down on Bathsheba. And it was from here that he conceived the idea of writing mother poem and son poem. And from here, he looked at the vista. He looked beyond the horizon and he saw Africa. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you look to the left, to the center, and the right of your scene here at Hackerton's Cliff, when you look out to sea, the only other land beyond that horizon is Africa. Dakar, Senegal, 3,700 miles away from here. And that is, well, spiritually, you can come here and visualize. Because all of the slave ships which came from West Africa stopped here first in Barbados. And this would have been the first view of the island of Barbados and their new home for the African captives who were going to be enslaved. And from here they sailed around the north coast and round down to Bridgetown, and it is there they were auctioned and became enslaved people. So this has historical and spiritual significance, Hackerton's Cliff does. For us, for Kamau Brathwaite, and for all of the 95% of the Barbadian population, the descendants of Africa. And from here too, you look down immediately in front of you and to your right, over where those royal palms are. Now you are looking at the lands of Newcastle Plantation. Newcastle Plantation was owned by the Hayneses. Sir Robert Haynes settled there in the early 1700s, and he also owned the plantations of Clifton Hall, Wakefield, Guinea, and Bath, and Easy Hall, which is just behind us, right? Newcastle was the major seat of the Hayneses, and of course Edmund Haynes gave land to our south, land on the Malvern Plantation, to the Moravians, who built their church and called it Mount Tabor. But looking down on Newcastle, where the area you see the royal palms, now that is an area where there was Newcastle tenantry, and that was the home of the Redlegs. The Redlegs, or poor whites, were concentrated in the eastern parishes. They came from England as indentured servants in the 1630s and 40s when the sugar revolution occurred, and from the 1650s some of them were sent by that terrible man Oliver Cromwell. They were Scottish, they were Irish, they were Welsh, and many of our whites in St. John and throughout Barbados have Scottish names, such as Hode and Roach and Lynch. And these people, when their servitude ended, and remember they were indentured servants, almost slaves, white slaves, and they were indentured to their masters for 7 years. When that 7-year period ended, some of them, like Henry Morgan, the famous pirate, went off and pursued a life beyond these shores. Morgan, as you know, became the most famous pirate from this part. And some migrated to Bridgetown, but a lot of them stayed in this area at which we are looking, right? And they're settled. They settled on the marginal lands on which we are looking in St. John, all the way down to the coast, which we call Congo Bay, Brodie, Azores, and Martins Bay. And then right here under Hackleton's Cliff, there was a settlement called Below the Cliff. Now we are standing on top of the cliff. Below the cliff in Newcastle was the home of the poor whites of St. John. And they had names like Gibson, Farnham, and King, Standard, Redmond. And of course, two names stand out, Fenty and Goddard. Now, when you say those names, that brings us to another folk song from St. John. And I hope that Pearson Bellamy and Bertel Mason and Julian Messiah and Jennifer Seeley are listening. Let's go after three. 1, 2, 3. Down in the woods where the breadfruits grow, see the Bacco Johnnies all in galore. Old Pa Henny and Jimmy Stunt too, old Roger Fenty and Flapper and Blue. They love the breadfruits to their hearts. The only thing it does make them bark. The coffee, tea give the Bacco misery, and the roast breadfruit does make them hoot. I went down at Mr. Goddard, and I was surprised to see the food. They had coffee, tea, and roast breadfruit scrape with the slices hanging all round the plate. They love the breadfruits to their hearts, etc., etc., etc. Now, who were these people? Old Pa Henny and Jimmy Stunt, old Roger Fenty. Who? Roger Fenty? Yes, that is Rihanna's great-great-grandfather. Roger Fenty lived in Newcastle tenantry, and he is, as we said, the ancestor of Robin Rihanna Fenty, and the great-great-uncle of Bishop Peter Fenty, who is, as we speak, in Toronto as a bishop and nearing the point of 45 years as an Anglican priest and about 17 as bishop of that province in Toronto. And who were the Goddards? Now, Joseph Nathaniel Goddard, born in 1874. We have been to see the foundation of his house in those woods there where you see the what we call cabbage coconut or royal palms. And he and about 40 others lived in a place called Below the Cliff or Down in the Woods. They were tenants of Newcastle Plantation, and some people say they were squatters, but they paid no rent, but they lived a life of the peasantry. They were not rich. They scraped a living. They went out to sea, and there's a famous picture of fishermen from Newcastle. Joseph Nathaniel Goddard became a speculator, a buyer of livestock, living livestock, and then he took it to Bridgetown and sold it to the abattoir and to people to butcher, and he got money from that. And he proceeded to Bridgetown and established himself in the Kensington area, Kensington Plantation. He and his wife to produce 10 children, 9 boys and 1 girl, and she married a Patterson. And that was the beginning of the Goddard Empire. He began to sell all kinds of things, a shop. He bought the Ice House, which is now Bank of Nova Scotia on Broad Street. That was the Ice House before we had refrigeration. He sold all kinds of everything, and he branched out. And now the Goddards have a commercial empire which spreads over 13 countries in the Caribbean. And all of his sons and his daughter worked for Goddard Enterprises, and that became famous. So out of the depths of poverty in this area, Newcastle, so the Goddards have been the most outstanding family of the Redlegs, so-called because their feet turned reddish brown, working in the hot sun in this area. Other prominent people who have come from this Redleg ancestry were Sir David Seal and the Seal family, and Sir Charles Othniel or Cole Williams and his brother Ralph Busy, and Reverend Holmes Williams. And there are too many people who are from the Redleg grouping for us to mention. We just mentioned the prominent ones, but I went to school, primary school, with Redlegs. I went to law school with Redlegs, and some of them gained Barbados scholarship, etc., and they have done well. They have risen, thriven, and thrived, as my old grandmother would say. So this is the area from which so much history has developed. We could continue talking just about this area of Hackleton's Cliff.
We came to enjoy the view. Historian Trevor Marshall taught us the economic and social history of Barbados that could be derived from a view from this point, Hackleton's Cliff. It is indeed a true saying, history crystallizes in moments and it is formed in decades. I'm inspired. Be good to yourself and look out for your neighbors. Goodbye for now.